Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This Crypto Heartbeat. It is that time again. It's Stephen Friday, right side up in honor of Steve Staggs. Folks, do you feel it? I feel it. Um, there's hope again, and there's something that is happening that I know you sense. I sense it as well, and just super excited. We took last week off. Unfortunately, I didn't warn you of that. We had uh, our family trip that we do once a year during the summertime. And then my wife and I celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary yesterday. And so I am super excited to share with you some really exciting things today. Um, but first off, I will just say I'm extremely thankful. I'm really, really thankful. The Lord has been speaking um, such encouragement. And I don't know if you've been paying attention to things that have shifted in this world politically. Um, but I want to tell you a unique story. This is something that Steve wrote about, but he never really talked much about on Right Side Up. And that was about um, the vertical shift. And he wrote about it, but then he told me about it as well. And it was really interesting because it was a vision that Steve had. And very dramatic for him. Literally seeing in the sky essentially three huge columns, and one of those columns moving, and Satan being exposed. And there's a lot more to the story than that. I'll use that. Carter will know exactly what I'm talking about. But I saw that in its the results of that over the this last week, and to see the exposure of Satan, and it literally was like Satan on the run. And I think about all of you, all of us who are seeking to be in the game, whether we're able to hit the curveball or not, we have walked across the chalk. And there's been so many things that the Lord has revealed in this process, and most of it's been through all of the things that I was taught by Steve. And I reflect upon the journey that we're all on, and to think that I meet Steve at a Texan meetup, and 2 years of listening to him, and all of these things are showing themselves to be true. And what did Steve say? Don't trust me, ask him yourself. And that's what I've been doing. And what's amazing is the things that I didn't understand, I'm starting to understand. And that's really encouraging, that there are things that you can literally ask him, and he's going to tell you about how he made all of this. And that's the brilliance of Jesus himself. The creation, the things that have been embedded since the beginning of time. And this means you were, designed and created for a purpose and a time. You are a part of the construct of creation, and you don't even realize how geniusly you've been made. And a lot of this, if we think about it, what is the vision of God in his creation? Obviously, that we would do it with him in the fullness of his nature and character. But also, if you think about the thief on the cross, and it's like, today you're going to be with me in paradise. Well, what is this thing that, heaven and earth should become one? What is this idea? What is the work that we have to do while we're here? What is the big vision? And if you think about it, God's vision and plan for us is not destruction. And it's a blessing and a protection and a walking, and it's actually joy and peace and this fullness of life. And it's hard to imagine that when you're dealing with things like, hey, my eyes, they don't work so good, right, Mike? And so I'll tell you, folks, I'm really thankful. You're going to be amazed by today for a number of reasons. But let's say hello to you, and then I'll share with you the tool that Mr. Ray has made that will serve you. And I'm so impressed with it. And I'm going to demonstrate that for the stream. And then we're gonna hear from Steve about the high places. I literally prayed this morning. I was searching the tool, and I just stopped and I said, "All right, Jesus, what do you want to share?" And he said, "The high places." So that's what we're doing today. And that's good. That's good. Mike Costello, good morning, Matt and Steve, and all the RSU buds. Absolutely. Blind leading the blind here, possibly 3 more weeks until surgery. Mike, we are with you, buddy. It's got to be so difficult. A man, if you don't know Mike, he loves books. He loves to read, and it's really difficult when you can't see. And so we stand with you, and thanks for being here. We're an encouragement to each other. That's, I think, a big part of our role as we do this together. Carter Hill's here. Good morning, gentlemen. I'm curious what Jesus has to say. I'm interested. Amen. Amen. Katie, hello. Good to see you, buddy. Taryn is here. Thanks for being here, Taryn. You're always supportive and always on all the streams. I appreciate that. Congratulations, Matt, and may God bless your marriage abundantly beyond your wildest dreams for many years to come. Thank you so much. Last night we were at dinner, and it was just a time where, really reflecting on the blessings, and those blessings aren't just from the decisions we've made, but also generationally through my wife's family, and just recounting the goodness of God. And so very, very thankful. So thank you so much. Oh my gosh, you're going to go to the vertical shift. Well, I'm not going to go deep into that because that's actually something that I think that's Carter, wouldn't you say that's like Steve Stagg's 401 or a graduate level class? It felt like that to me when I first saw it, but I just comment to say the things that Steve's the real deal, but you can be the real deal too, because Jesus is available to all of us and you can ask him and he'll show you. He just crab walked more than you and I, right? And it's one of those things. And what I mean by crab walk is, for those of you who are new here and haven't been with us for a long time, Steve used the sports analogy or baseball as a great example because he was a professional baseball player. And he said many, many times that, you can go to your home team's field. Let's say you've got a AAA team in your town, and you love going there and it's fun, and you sit in the stands and you root for the home team. And so think about the home team as kind of the Christianese thing, right? You're at church and you're in the stands and you see the players and you learn about the players and you know how the game is played. You know that people throw different types of pitches and you cheer them on, or you sit in the stands. But there's a difference between knowing that there is a curveball and being able to throw a curveball and also to hit a curveball. And so there's this analogy that I think is perfect that Steve shared, which is, are you in the game and do you have interest in being in the game? Because not everybody does. You can spend an entire lifetime in the stands rooting for the home team, but there's a difference and it takes courage. And there's a whole different experience that happens when you're on the field and you walk across the chalk. It's very testing of your preparation. And you think about that, well, these are the people. This is what Jesus called the ecclesia, the called out ones. You're called out from something. And so think about this. I think of as a little boy, when the bigger kids said, hey, come play with us. And you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm capable to do this. Well, Jesus is calling us out onto the field of play. And in the field of the play, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of risk. And many times it will beat you up, but you learn from that. And that's the thing about being in the game in this scenario, is that you're not alone in the game, right? You're not just going down some dark path. You do it with him, but he's calling you into the game. And, I've been realizing and just asking Jesus about this concept of the church. What is the church? Well, it is an onboarding function, right? It onboards you into this. So let's imagine the town, and let's say it's kind of a remote town, has a AAA team, and you know that there's a stadium there, but you've never come to a game. And somebody says, hey, come on to a game. Check this out. It's really cool. Well, in some respects, that's what the church is providing, is saying, hey, we've got a home team here, and we've got this kind of onboarding thing. And Steve made this really clear. He's like, when I was a kid, I was 6 years old, the pastor said, hey, would you like to meet Jesus? And Steve said, I was like assuming maybe he's in the back or something. Maybe like, where's he at? And I think that's so great. A child, right? You're just like, hey, yeah, I want to meet the guy. I've heard a lot about him. Let me meet him. Is he in the back? I just love the way he shared that. But that's kind of essentially, this function. And I would say there's a lot of amazing things that are happening in local churches. Generally, it's not happening from a structure perspective. It's happening from people, right? People that are saying, hey, come here, and they're caring for each other. But that's onboarding, and it gets you kind of into the stand. So you walk through the gates and you come in, and maybe somebody gets some popcorn or some peanuts, and you sit there. But there are people who sit there all of their lives in the stands, and they may root for the team. And they're like, you're sitting in my seat, right? You know exactly what I'm saying. But there's a difference between being in the stands and being on the field. And that's just, the revelation and understanding of going, okay, Do you want to do that? Because it's risky, right? I don't want to be in it's like put me back into the matrix. I just want to be a battery. And a lot of it is like that. And the question is, are you interested? Because he's calling you out from something into himself. And this week and last week, Ray and I've had so many breakthroughs. What is Jesus saying? And this is just what Steve said. It's true. Jesus is calling you to stand with him in the middle of the whirlwind where there is peace. Stand with him. And this is what Steve's going to talk about here about the high places. But I'm going to show you how I found the exact spot and the exact content that I wanted to find in 37 episodes with Steve Staggs. Okay. So let's do it. Let's do it. All right, here we go. Check this out. So if you would like to find anything Steve ever said, we have a tool for you. It is at stevestaggs.com. So if you go to stevestaggs.com, and I'm gonna go there. You could go there if you're at your computer right now. And it's awesome. It says, welcome friends. Are you interested? All right, here we go. So this is the tool. And this is a tool that Mr. Ray built based on the videos that we recorded. And so if you go to stevestaggs.com, you'll just see this splash page. It says, welcome friends. Are you interested? And it says, click here to go to the search tool. So we're going to do that. We're going to click on the search tool. Well, this is just any search terms, right? I'm going to put in here, you could put in here vertical shift if you wanted to, I suppose, but it's only used once. I'm going to use the term high places. Okay. So this is just a natural speech. Any singular word or any multiple words that you want, you need to put in quotes. Okay. So check this out. Boom. And look what it does. It shows you every single episode that the high places appeared in. Then it takes each one of the episodes and gives you the actual quote. So in episode 13, this is what he said about the high places. And then I just look through it. Oh, it's episode 14. And he says, oh, this is the beginning of it. In the Old Testament, there is this concept of high places. And folks, that's where we're about to go. But you can do this. You can go to stevestaggs.com, click on this deal, search anything, and find anything from anything Steve said. Isn't that awesome, folks? Big shout out to ZZ Tesco. Ray, my buddy Ray, the wizard, has created this tool for us. And so now if you're curious about something, you're like, yeah, I remember Steve talking about something about the vertical thing, or, he talked about reaction and proaction. You'll see everywhere it appears. Isn't that amazing? This is a gift that Mr. Ray has given, and it's just awesome. So I'll be using it every week moving forward. I've used it in its kind of earlier beta version, but now it's fully available to you to search anything in this whole Right Side Up series. And it's all the first, I think, 38 episodes or something like that. All the stuff where Steve talked. So let's go to the content, my friends. All right. This is episode 14, the high places. Let's enjoy. And let me get my notes out.
In the Old Testament, there is this concept of high places, and what occurred at that time. It was very common to build an altar to the guardian god of that area, to build an altar on what they called a high place, which would be the highest visible place in that area, and then which was in contrast in the discussion at Gen Con, in contrast to the invitation of Jesus in response to the past tense statement that God has set us with Christ in heavenly places, past tense. So if you look at those two perspectives, one is looking up at one who calls itself a God that is still fixed and planted on earth, as opposed to sitting with Jesus in heavenly places looking from his perspective. And the fascinating thing about it is that when we look to the high place, we're actually looking to one whom we have built and whom we have invented, asking that one to do more than enable us to do more than what we're capable of doing. So we're looking upward at something that's fixed on earth that we ourselves have created as a God, and then expect that God to enable us to do more than what we ourselves are capable of doing. when we are that God's creator, as opposed to sitting with Jesus and then surveying from his perspective the spiritual and physical landscape to see what he's seeing so that we can respond and work with him in the reality of that moment. Well, those are two totally different perspectives. One is an earthbound perspective, one is a heavenly perspective where we're seeing as Jesus is seeing. Well, guess what? Did Jesus ever react? Okay? Who have you come after? We're coming after Jesus. I am he. Boom, knocks them on their keister. They get back up and he says, is there someplace you want to go? Let's go. Pilate, hey, don't you know who I am? Don't you know that I have the authority to either release you or crucify you? Jesus, you would have no authority over me if it was not first given to you from my Father above. You would have none. ... Now here's the kind of thing that happens when you're talking with Jesus about these things. ... And oh, by the way, I might be giving some thought to why he's putting me under your authority right about now. And I'm just not talking to you, Pilate. I'm talking to the one who's yanking your chain on this one. Okay? I'd be given some serious thought as to why my Father is putting you under your authority at this moment. Something's about to go down. Have at it. And just not without an ounce of arrogance or any kind of blustering or power display, just speaking what is true in the moment that flows out of this clear perspective of learning to live with Jesus in the moment. He is not one bit flustered about anything. And to think that we have not just the ability, but that's how we were created to live with him. So a person doesn't wake up one day and say, oh, that sounds good, I'm going to do it tomorrow. Well, name one new skill that you've developed that you developed and became proficient at it one day. It's not how it works. It works by this practicing and learning to live with him and watching that, hey, this thing is really more real than what we consider real. You've had that experience.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, gee whiz, we talk about something, it blows your mind. I think you're well, you talk about it so often as, wow, that's really big. And then within the next day, sometimes within the next few minutes, you're right smack in the center of an experience that's saying, that's what I'm talking about right there. That's not me talking. That's Jesus talking. This is what we're talking about here. And you just described an example of that a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So it's very, very real. I mean, this is not hocus pocus stuff.
No, and I think that's in a practical sense, people think about what is wisdom, what is discernment, and you think about a lot of this is having the right perspective.
Yeah.
And, you just talked about these high places, right? I think about the Asherah poles, right? Building these things that we look up to, whether it's a golden calf, whether it's the Bible, the book, the written words on a page book, whatever it may be that it could be a sports team, it could be a spouse, it could be relationships, it could be drugs, it could be money, but these things that we look up to.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I love the metaphor, right? This idea, are we looking up to this? Well, I like this idea because throughout the scriptures, it talks about ascending, right? Ascending and descending. It talks about Father in heaven. We see this kind of separation on earth as it is in heaven. And, we have this general sense of direction, right? Kind of down is bad and up is good. And so what do? We create our own, these things, these high places, right? We think, and of course the Tower of Babel is a great example of this. So we're going to build up there.
Yeah.
But to think that our perspective could change and that could make all the difference. One of the things that I see as an additional barrier in this is that I think so many people within the church have been taught that this is about conversion and about really, I think a lot of people get hooked up into this idea of salvation and this idea that, that this is this momentary thing. I think what's so refreshing about this approach, Steve, is to say, we jokingly say, let's try him on for size. Take 50% of your time and just cultivate a relationship. Well, what does that look like? You can ask him what he thinks. You can ask him what he thinks. And I think some fear for a lot of people is, what if he actually responds? What if he actually gives me wisdom and discernment? What if I am like, a lighthouse that is fixed in a mooring and the waves are, crashing around me? What if I'm actually stable in the midst of a storm? What if he actually does share with me his perspective? And of course, when you back out, in a way, Jesus modeled this, all of the stories of his life, right? And we talked about this before. Satan comes to him in all of these pictures of, well, hey, I'll give you all of this. Turn these bread into stone, these stones into bread. And he's like, man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. And I think about this idea of it coming out, coming forth. That's a momentary thing. It's a time-based thing that says now it's coming out.
Yeah.
Peter, James, and John are on the Mountain of Transfiguration. He says, the voice from heaven says, listen, this is my son, listen to him. That we not only see in this hierarchy, but we also see in this momentary, like, listen to him. And when he walked this place, he modeled that perfectly. It's amazing, actually, when you start drilling down and to say, hold on, he wasn't reactive. He wasn't, I think probably the only, couple moments of real humanity that we saw were, hey, is there another way we could do this? Right? He's literally sweating blood, right? And he asked the Father, remove this cup from me. He also asked him, hey, why have you forsaken me? We see these moments of his mother saying, hey, get some wine for the guys. We ran out. And he's like, my time, come on, woman, this isn't my right time. And we see a proactive Jesus and a non-reactive one. And it feels a lot like it's modeling this idea that I don't do anything apart from my Father. And you could tell that Jesus was constantly in counsel with the Father.
Yeah.
What I love about it is, why would we do it any differently? It's been clearly pointed out to us that, hey, listen to him. And that's so cool. This idea, why did he say I'm the way? Why would he say I'm the truth and I am the life? Oh, okay. So you're saying that this is how it's structured. Yeah, I'm the way that we do this. You listen to me. You don't have to do it in the morning over coffee. You can listen to me at any moment.
Yeah.
And so, do you see that same thing as a major barrier, that it's almost like we're so focused within the church on getting someone saved and getting someone converted that we're neglecting this idea that no, the creator of the universe is alive and he speaks and is available to you now, but it's almost like you have permission to ask him yourself. And that's what I feel like you've done for me. You're like, no, don't listen to me. Ask him yourself. That's all I've ever done. Try that and see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. It goes back to this strategic, engagement that we find ourselves in the middle of. I mean, listen, you can't talk about being saved and the power of God to save you for eternity, and yet there's nothing saved about you in the present that is far inferior to eternity. So which is it? Are we saved or not? Are we not saved? What does it mean to be saved? And man, you start asking that question, they don't have an answer. The church does not have a meaningful answer, which I want to be very careful here. The objective here is not to slam the church. It is to say, folks, kindergarten was great, but when you're 25 years old, it's no longer applicable to your life. It's time to move on. The church does not allow you to move on. It keeps you in a do loop. See, talking about the same things over and over and over and over and over again ad nauseum until, guess what? Why do so many folks, I was one, fall asleep in the church? Because I've heard the thing 50 times if I've heard it once. Let's please move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can sit there and slam the church, or I can take a step back and say, Jesus, how are you seeing this thing? I think these people are a lot like me, and I think I'm a lot like them. The reason I'm coming here is because I want to know about you.
Yeah.
See, that's my 6-year-old story. I'm still looking for you.
Yeah.
See, somebody has told me, hey, if any of you out there are interested in getting to know Jesus, why don't you come on up here? Man, I sprinted. Matt, I'm still sprinting.
Yeah.
See, because and as I started and continued that sprinting, eventually it was sprinting outside of that thing that calls itself the church, because it was actually a stepping stone to a much greater relationship.
Yep.
So for anybody who's interested in that, hey, back to your, try it on for size.
Yep.
What I'm going to do on my part is I'm going to tell you the experiences I've had and the results of that, and to encourage you to try it out yourself. But as you well know, once we get into the conversations about it, okay, now it's time to take that next step. I'll give you some input. I'll give you some thoughts to kind of stimulate your thinking. But man, you got to go back to Jesus. Otherwise, you just become a follower of another concept and idea.
Yeah.
You don't become intimately related to the one you are sprinting after. Well, keep sprinting. Keep it up. Keep doing it.
Yep.
You know?
Keep sprinting. Wow, folks, there's so much here. And I feel like a big part of what we're doing here on Right Side Up, honoring Steve, is I think one of the things he would say, and I kind of was hearing it during that whole time he was speaking, is don't listen to me, right? Don't set up Steve Staggs as another belief system. I think that's really, really important. He is just a man who desired to be in the game. And he started treating Jesus the way that, he's alive and he speaks. All right, if you're alive, hey, you spoke this into existence. I can speak in here. Perhaps you can speak in here. And he literally practiced that for 40 years. And what did he do? He just said, "Hey, I'm gonna bring that to you. I'm gonna offer that to you." But what's so amazing and refreshing about it is he never set himself up as a middleman. And of course, here we got this tool, we've got all these videos. But I think it's really important. You're not following Steve, you're not following me, you're not following Carter, you're following Jesus. And it's like, well, all of this stuff that's happened within the church, Steve used the term the spirit of the church. And I'm coming to understand what that means. It's not just this universal thing that, the church is evil or something. No, what I'm suggesting is that, the evil one and the forces of darkness are trying to do everything they can to lie, right? To distort. And what happens is that we get into a structure, and that structure becomes a system, and it has barriers and walls and frameworks to it. We're building on top of something. And it's just like the Asherah poles or the Tower of Babel. It's the things that we build on top. And a lot of times the intentions are good, but what ends up happening is it sounds like it's right. For example, you need to come under the authority of the Bible, right? The Bible church. Well, hold on a second. What is the Bible? The Bible is a testament. It's an account of what Jesus said. If you actually look at these things, why were these worthy to be written down? Why were these stories worthy to be written down? Because God spoke something to somebody and they said, hey, this was really important. But it should be pointing us to the one who speaks, not to the book that was written about them. And that is a really significant thing because it's something that seems right. But if you actually probe it, you go, hold on a second. If you want to meet the kid down the street, you don't go to the store and try to find a book about him. You go meet him. And I think that that's one of the ways in which the spirit of the church has kind of convinced you. If I can convince you that this guy's a historical figure and that he's dead, you're not going to seek him. And so it's, I think it's really important to be said. We got tools, we got all this stuff, but we're not worshiping Steve Staggs. He would say that, no, this is not a new religion. This is one man's journey and a testament of his journey to seeking the living, speaking Jesus, period. Are you willing to try that on for size? And I think what's been amazing to me is the realizations by journeying with Jesus and seeing, hey, how do you see this? And some of it, it doesn't have to be like this lockstep. I'm about to now ask you how you see this. No, it's like breathing. That's what he said. It becomes like breathing. This consultation isn't just some rote thing where it's like, now I'm going to ask Jesus. No, it's a constant contemplation. And we saw this on the face of Steve almost every time that he was asked a question. It's like, all right, what are these, what is this with concept? What is it to do it with you? In the high places, which this stream is about, is this idea that, and Steve said this in one of the notes, I said, he has seated us in the heavenlies. In this past tense, you have been seated with him. Okay, so that means you have been previously seated with him. But what do? We say, oh, I'm going to build on top of this thing, right? So I'm going to be on the ground. I'm going to build this thing that I create, whatever this may be, a golden calf, Tower of Babel, an Asherah pole, whatever it may be, a man-made creation, or even the spirits of darkness who are here. I'm going to build up and look up at this thing and look up to it to get wisdom. And we're expecting something that we create to be greater than the one that created it. And what he said is, no, what Jesus said is, you are seated with me in the heavenlies. Well, what does that look like? And I did an AI image of, like, imagine you're sitting up on a high, in the heavenlies with Jesus, right? He's got his arm around you, or he's sitting next to you. And I just imagine like two dudes on like a dock fishing. Okay. You can probably get that picture in your mind. Like I can imagine like me and Steve sitting on the dock, right? Me and Jesus sitting up in the heavenlies going, you see that? And I can just imagine Jesus pointing out in across say, take a look at that. Let me tell you what that is. And then think about you going, I'm really interested in knowing what that is. That's it. That's all it is. And then what does that provide for you? Well, a perspective that is properly oriented. But the spirits of darkness, I hate to, and Steve made a really good point of this. He said, we're not trying to bash the church. Everything, we're in this muck. We're in this kind of cesspool trying to evaluate it and understand it. Well, there's one who has seated us. We've been seated with him who will tell us. But what we're doing is we're going our own way and we're saying, no, I'll figure this out on my own. Well, this is the story. This is the story of all of this experience, human experience. It started in the garden. Adam and Eve walking with God, right? There's obviously a clear understanding that they were in consultation in that place. Here's Elohim, man and woman, right? Created in the image of God, walking with him, all those things. And he said, there's some rules here. Let me tell you how this place is set up. You can eat from any of these trees except this one. Okay. Well, what happens is the serpent, who is not Satan, right? He was one of the most intelligent that the Lord God had created. Satan came into the serpent, right? It was a host. And in that is also a really important note that inherently Satan has to have, these spirits have to have a host. They have to have authority because they're outside until they have this authority to come in. And what is the lie that is said to Eve? Surely he didn't say that, making you question what he said. And what did Eve do? And I asked Steve this, and I was like, well, what are we supposed to do when we hear something that we don't know if it's true or not? Right? We talk about discernment. And in a way, what he said was, could she have said, hang on a second, let me go check on that. Let me go verify. Let me go make sure I know exactly what he did say. You can stop and you can back up and go, how do you see this? Right? Rather than believing the lie. Because all that Satan can do and all the forces of darkness can do is to make you offers. You do not have to accept them. And that's where we give our authority over. But what's amazing is that this was not a surprise to God. And that's where we started this whole series from the very beginning was Satan's, entering this garden a surprise to God or not? And I think what is so fascinating is we don't talk about this in the church, right? This isn't preached on. We're presented with this story, this false story, that it was, oh my goodness, Satan just ruined the plan of God, threw a monkey wrench right into the cogs and just grinded it to a halt. Well, what does that say about God if that's the case? We talk about him being all-knowing and all-powerful and all, right? The supreme being. What kind of supreme being are you if somebody can like catch you off guard or surprise you? But what's amazing about it is this idea of who they were as Elohim, made in the image of God, that they had a certain character and nature, and there was a design that they would do it with him. And so their eyes being open to see the difference between good and evil is a component of ruling and reigning. And so they got kicked out, flaming swords. Why? Why weren't there flaming swords to keep Satan out? It's the same thing that's happening. It's a model for us to understand is that we've been given dominion over this world, right? There's a hierarchy. There are levels of things. And so many people, through the spirit of the church and through the spirits in general, are trying to turn upside down, and they have turned upside down the hierarchy. And what's interesting is in this hierarchy of Elohim, right? There's this Father, Jesus, Yahweh of the Elohim, literally the boss of the Elohim, of which you are a member. You have the ability to rule and reign with him in the fullness of his nature and character. There's an Elohim class. This is the ruling class. There is this other class that is the messenger class, which is the angels. And then there is the servant class, which are the animals. And he gave us directive in this place. And I believe that there was a little bit of jealousy, right? If you're not in the class of the Elohim, meaning you don't have the birthright, you are not a son, you're going to do everything you can to subvert and that jealousy and that envy. And what ends up happening, you think about God created all of this, right? None of this is a surprise. This didn't just evolve. He created all of these things, including the angels that fell. And you think about this. If your son, or let's say a lieutenant in your army, does something and does something wrong, what do? Do you kill him? Do you put a gun to his head and kill him? No. You put him in the brig. And what does it say about the fallen angels and where are they? And you think about this presence of subversion. And they have to have your authority in order to essentially take up shop and presence within you. And that's the amazing thing, is that you get offers all the time. I said this last episode. I said, if somebody comes to your house and they've got $1 million cash and your house is only worth $250,000 and they got literally a suitcase full of cash, do they own your house? No. What if they made you an offer and they said, hey, I'll give you $1 million for your house, cash right here? Do they own your house? No. That's what's happening all the time, is that you're getting offers upon offers upon offers. And I've even dealt with it and shared with you that there are times when Satan will literally say to you, you should kill yourself, right? You should do all of these things. And you're like, no. And that's where I think probably one of the most valuable things, one of the most valuable gifts is the vocabulary and language that Steve gave to me. He said, who has authority to speak to you? Who do you give your authority to speak to you? Well, Jesus. And I told him, I said, I got down on my knees and I literally said to the Lord, I said, Jesus, only you have the authority to speak to me. And you know what Steve did? Big smile on his face. He said, all heaven rejoices. And what's amazing is I've realized this. There is a very important concept of speaking things out loud. He spoke things into existence. And Ray and I this week have had this amazing breakthrough on this idea of saying, what do you want? What do you want? And what are you willing to speak out loud? On one end of the spectrum, there's this like, Satan, you have no standing here. And I've had to say it out loud and he has fled from me. Well, that's what the Bible says. It's certainly how it works. But I had to say it out loud. I couldn't just be like, oh, Satan, go away in my head. No, I had to say it out loud. And he fled from me. You're like, okay, this whole thing is about you, Elohim man, your choices and your authority. And so what is this whole thing? He designed this so that we would rule and reign with him in the fullness of his nature and character. And what is that fullness? A blessing and a protection. And so we rule over the things that are trying to penetrate that, right? The offers that come. No, man does not live on bread alone, right? Turn these stones into bread. That's this order, this offer to do this thing. I'll give you this all. No, man does not live on bread alone, but out of every word that comes out of the mouth of God. So we have this model. And besides the fact that we have the entire Old Testament that we see people literally listening to God, God said so many times. It's a testament to a speaking God, to a real human, personal God who you can talk to. But what's amazing is we have it's really hard for us to imagine. And you're like, well, does he talk in English? Does he talk in Spanish? Does he talk in Japanese? And this idea that, well, he is the greatest teacher because his design is that you would do it with him and listen. But you can't expect a baby you bring home to speak English. But there's tons of communication that happens, and that's what I've been seeing. And I think he communicates differently with each of us based on how he has created us. And so in some cases, people will literally be told things to write down. Steve wrote a ton of things that Jesus spoke to him. I see pictures of things and then words, right? I see it like a visual. And there's a different way, but that's the beauty of any relationship, right? I think about my father-in-law. He's got 10 grandkids and one great grandchild. The way he talks and deals with each of the children is different, but he loves them all. And it's the same thing. This is a personal Jesus. This is a personal God. And you think of him saying that the only way to the Father, right, is through me, right? And this gate is narrow. Why is it narrow? And the path that leads to destruction so wide. The question is, are you interested? And that's why the concept of salvation and this idea that, hey, we bring the people into the church and says, hey, do you want to meet Jesus? And Steve at 6 year old is like, yeah, where's he at? I want to meet him. Because you can meet him. But this idea of the church is literally perpetual kindergarten. He said that in that talk. Well, what do we mean by perpetual kindergarten? We're welcoming you into this idea that there is this personal God, and hey, take a look what's been written about him. But we've stopped there, and we've almost gotten ourselves frozen there. And so you're in the stands, you've walked through the gates, you've understood what this is. You're like, wow, this is really cool. You've tasted and you've seen that the Lord is good, and you're like, I'm good here. I'm good here. And it's perpetually that same thing. We get people saved, and we think that that's the value. Well, no. Look at the history of the world. It's about people who have gone out and risked many things. And it's interesting. The people who God said, "Hey, do this," and then they're like, we don't really want to kill them all. And they got some really nice cows. And boy, I like me some filet mignon. The people that were like, no, I'm going to go my own way. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to take it for myself or whatever. And you're not actually following what he says. But this idea of a full life, right? John 10:10, a full life. What does it look like? Well, it's a journey with him. But if you're convinced that Jesus is dead and he's a historical figure and he's only alive on Easter Sunday, which I mean, I feel like that was really clear, and that you're supposed to come underneath the hierarchy of a book. It's like saying when Moses was on the mountain and he was given the 10 commandments and then they broke, that he would have got some epoxy or super glue and literally super glued them together. And it's actually amazing. Like if you think about why they broke, maybe one of the reasons is to show you that you don't worship stone. And it becomes so clear when you're like, we don't worship stone. We don't worship the tablet. We worship the author of the tablet. And so instead of him taping it back together and gluing it back together, he went back to the guy and said, hey, can I get another copy? This whole situation that's happened with Trump and getting him shot in the ear, I've wanted to talk to you about that. And this is the right forum for it. It is not lost on me that he was shot in the ear. And I don't know if you saw the guy who prophesied 3 months prior to that, seeing this happen, which I think is incredible. But he fell to his knees and his shoes were knocked off by the Secret Service. And of course, I just look at that and I'm like, hey, Jesus, what's this all about? And then if you listen to him last night, that first speech since he was shot, you know what my wife said? And I saw something in his eyes when he first came out on Tuesday. He didn't speak, but I saw it in his eyes. And then I heard it in his speaking. My wife said, this is the first time I've ever listened to Donald Trump and didn't think he was a buffoon. Isn't that crazy? This is my wife. And like, I'm like very interested in politics. My wife is not particularly, but she sat down and listened. She goes, this is the first time I've actually thought that Donald Trump was a normal person. And it wasn't just because, well, I see his grandkids sitting on his lap. No, he was different. And you know what happened? And you think, well, there's all kinds of people who are broken that were used by God, right? All of the stories of, ragtag group of people that are broken being used. That's you. That's me. Are you interested? And a lot of times you think about this. I have important work to you. He even said to Pilate, you do not have authority unless my Father in heaven gave it to you. Well, look at the leaders of the world. The Lord literally directs these things. And here, this authority, and it's like in man's hubris, in his richness, in his fame, and in his own personal glory, I saw something genuine, and it's something you can't fake, right? I'm going to shoot you. You're going to get shot in the ear, which I think is extremely relevant. I'm going to knock your shoes off and put you on your face. Are you listening? And that's what it says to me. Like when you get the piece of your ear shot off and you're alive and you likely should have been dead from the assassin's bullet. Hello, are you listening? And it's like Thomas. It's like, hey, I got to stick my hand in his side or I'm going to believe. Well, I'm going to shoot your ear. Are you listening? And the humility and the genuine nature of like, and I don't believe it was a political tactic because you can smell it when somebody's playing the role of I'm trying to be authentic. I'm a politician. And you saw something I did last night. I saw something. I'm like, this is a real guy that faced his own humanity. He faced it and understood that. And literally, whether or not he's using the same languages that we're talking about here of like, only you have the authority to speak to me, certainly got his attention. And it's funny, like Tucker Carlson said when he spoke, he goes, something changed in the world in that moment where he stood back up from that. Because you can't fake that, right? Like you've been shot, you're completely, I mean, the guy's 78 years old. And you stand up and you're like seeing all these people. And it's like he puts up his fist and says, fight, fight, fight. Well, you can't fake that. You don't know what's going to happen if you get shot in the ear or whatever it is, and you have that crisis situation. And it reveals a character. But there's something in that that gives us hope. Not that we worship a man who's a president, but it's this, what is the human creation capable of in, with God himself? Like what is it? What are the capabilities? And to me, it was very hopeful and very encouraging to me to be bold and to be courageous, to be strong and to be courageous. And what does that look like for you? Jesus, show me how this works. What are we doing today? How did it go today? This constant holding these thoughts captive and saying, you know what? There's going to be all kinds of lies that come from all different places, all kinds of offers and everything. But you've got this nothing surprises you. You're not caught off guard. You are executing the plan exactly how you have planned it. And this idea of being in the game is, if the eyes of the Lord search to and fro to find those whose hearts are completely his so that he may strengthen them, I say, I'm right here. See me. See us. We want to be in the game. I don't know how to hit the curveball. Hey, will you teach me how to hit the curveball? I don't know. I mean, like, how do I know? I remember talking to Cadium. Cadium came all the way down to Austin, drove all the way down to Austin, like 11 hours, sat with me. And I remember sitting at that bar in that lobby at the Consensus Conference. And I had just experienced this stuff with Steve. And he said the exact same question I said to Steve. He goes, how do I know it's him? I want to hear from Jesus. I want to hear from the creator of all things. I want to talk to the guy who everything was created for him and by him. I want to be connected to the truth and the way and the life. How do I know it's him? You know what Steve said to me? And I said the same thing to Katie. What's your intent? Mr. Ray showed me a video of this pastor and his buddy. They got up on stage and he says, hey, this is my buddy. And the guy standing next to him was jacked. And I mean, he was massive, kind of Schwarzenegger. It cut big time. He had like a tank top on. He was just buff. And the pastor standing next to him, he goes, hey, this is my buddy. He introduced him. He said, we go to the same gym. And everybody laughed. They're like, oh my gosh, that's great. Hey, and Mr. Ray, if you're watching this, send me that link. I want to play that video. And it's like, he goes, we go to the same gym and we lift the same weights. He says, you know the difference between him and me? He has let that effort and that the work that he's put in at that gym influence everything about his life. He goes, you know how I treat the gym? I go to the gym and I go get a little bit from it so that I can go over here and eat this and do this. And I use it kind of as a crutch for me. He's let this literally transform who he is. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is incredible. That's just incredible. What's my intent? And he literally said his intent is that this would literally infuse and transform everything in his life. So how do you know that it's him listening? Right? Katie asked me, I asked Steve, what's your intent, man? Is your intent to hear from him? Is your intent? Well, what does that require? Without faith, it is impossible to please God because you first have to acknowledge that he exists and rewards those who earnestly seek him. Hey, I recognize that you exist and that you are real and that you speak and you're alive and that you have something to say about this because you made it. And I'm acknowledging that's where my interest is. I want this to transform my life. Think about how many people literally, like the woman who was bleeding for 12 years and literally touched the hem of his garment. And it says power went out of him and he was amazed by her faith. Remember that centurion guard comes and his daughter's sick? And he's like, you don't even need to come, man. Like, you don't need to come. I'm a man under authority. You just say the word. He goes, I tell this guy to go here and he goes there. And Jesus was amazed by his faith. This idea of that faith is you believe something that was spoken to you, right? That's the thing. And what's amazing about this, we don't understand this idea of prayer or, literally conferring with Jesus is listening, right? More than talking, right? We presented prayer as like the lottery. I want this and I want that and I want this. It's like, hey, how do you see this? Conferring, and that I would be changed. And that with that would come what Steve called the atomic packet of faith. And if you drill into the word prayer, it actually is, it's a substance that is handed to you that enables you to accomplish or to endure. Well, think about that. There are gifts given across that veil that Jesus is giving you through this conferring to change you into his likeness, to understand his perspective and to understand how it's created. And that's all Steve ever did. He just asked him, hey, how do you see this? You said that I was seated with you in the heavenlies. Well, how do you see this? And it was transformative to his life. But am I going to Jesus and just going, hey, I just want to break off a piece and I'll go my own way? And that's one of the greatest things I ever learned from him. He's like, yeah, Jesus, I need this money for this project and all this stuff. And, I want this to happen. Or he's, I've heard you speak something about, hey, this is what I want you to do. And then you go your own way and you're like, well, I guess I got to go raise the money now and find the money now. And he's like, no, Jesus doesn't communicate in incomplete sentences. Like, this is not if he says it, you can take it to the bank. Well, what does that mean? And what does that look like? Because in this world, we're so used to going our own way. The rich young ruler comes to Jesus and says, hey, what do I need to be saved? What does it mean to be saved? And what does Jesus say to him? Hey, go sell everything and follow me. And he was really bummed out because he owned a lot of things. Well, what are those things for us? Well, those are the things that we built up in high places that give us the security apart from Jesus. We're worshiping crypto. We're worshiping relationships or drugs or whatever it may be. These things in our lives that we build up, these things, and we expect the things that we build to speak to us, and we worship them. That's why he said, don't have any other gods before me. And this is what the high place is all about. That we're building these things up, that we're putting these things in these places, these high places, and expecting them to give us some sort of direction or wisdom. He said, no, it's upside down. Let's make this right side up. You are seated with me in the heavenly realms. Are you interested in my perspective? Folks, I really feel like since meeting Steve, I've understood the meaning of life. The meaning, the purpose, and I'm coming to understand the structure of it. We are coming into an amazing time. The question is, are you interested? And so I'm going to be really transparent. What are the things that I am feeling that God is impressing upon me? Hey, Matt, to be in the game, we animate tools. Well, we know that all tools are neutral. You know what I realized over the last 2 weeks? Your body is a tool. I stared at my dad in a casket. And I'm like, that's not him. It's a meat suit, folks. your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, this idea that he is in you. Well, hold on. When people die, they're like, I saw my body above myself. And like, hold on. So this is a tool? Yeah, it's a tool. How are you doing it? And the conviction for me is like, your health is a component of your capabilities to crab walk and to run the bases. What are you doing? I've given you these things. You want to be in the game? Fear not. Let's go. But there's so many things like that. And I did a stream yesterday about Trump and his assassination attempt and everything. And I listened to a lot of those speeches and I was really kind of frustrated, to be honest with you, that it's like we're lifting up these people and saying, hey, you went to Yale Law School. You don't hear anybody saying, hey, all the tools are neutral and we animate them in a certain nature and character. And the most important thing we understand about people is what is their nature and character and who do they bow before and who do they listen to? Steve often said, and I thought it was awesome, because imagine what it would look like if someone with true leadership who understood this and actually bowed before, King Jesus himself said, hang on a second, before we make this decision in the cabinet of the White House, they said, let's ask Jesus how he sees this. Let's consult with the one who made it all, that all things were made for him and by him. You think there might be some wisdom, some discernment, some vision, some directions, some speaking, some words, some guidance beyond man's going his own way? Because that's the other lie too, is that we're convinced that sin is this list, right? I got this list of stuff over here, and these are the bad things. Yeah, this is the bad things that bad people do. Well, certainly there's a list of those things, but what are they representative of? Us going our own way, doing it without him. I'll take it from here. Boss, I got this. I got it planned out. That's sin. Sin is just doing things apart from him. It's not this list of, well, that's a bad thing. That's like killing people. Well, we understand that. But that's what's so interesting, especially when it comes to people who are criticizing people, like gay people, for example. They're like, oh, look at this. God hates the sin, not the sinner, or whatever it may be. And you go, we're classifying this grouping of things. We're just going our own way. We do it all the time, but it's much more socially acceptable, those sins of going our own way, because that seems like you're having some initiative and you're working hard. Well, you can work hard in the wrong direction, that's for sure. And you don't realize that you're an enemy. It's amazing to me, folks, but it is, it's so cool. We have a tool now. So don't listen to me, and let me encourage you and let Steve encourage you. But I'm telling you, the answer to the question is go ask him yourself. That's it. Jesus is alive and he speaks, and he's available for you to ask. I have found tremendous value in speaking out loud. Jesus, you are the only one who has authority to speak to me, because I've recognized that at the core of this, it's these choices. And what did Steve say about choices? He said, these decisions that we make, these choices that we make, are the seeds of reality's harvest. And what is a seed but packed into it the entire package, and it grows into something that produces fruit. So the decisions that we make are these seeds that are planted that ultimately will harvest. And the question is, what seeds are we planting? These decisions that we make. And the question is, are we making these decisions with him or without him? That's the whole shooting match. And that's the true gospel. That's what Steve shared with me. And he's like, hey, and I'm just like, I'm transformed by it, folks. And then when I see it, I know it. And I'm like, that's why this whole issue of salvation is like, well, I got saved when I was 12 years old. And it's like, well, yeah, you sit in the back of the stands and play on your phone. And you think that that's what it's about. And I'm not sure it is. Jesus, there's accounts of him saying, hey, well, we prophesied in your name. We cast out demons in your name. He's like, I didn't even know you. What are you doing? And I just look at it, I'm like, I want to take this seriously, because I feel like there's so much at stake. But in the journey of doing this is where life is. And guess what? There's a ton of risk. Ton of risk. Folks, thanks for joining the Pulse today. Look who's here. Frosty Dog's here. He's going to be Trump for Halloween. Susie Q, what is up? John May, good to see you, buddy. Oh, is Hex Monkey here? Good morning, all. Things are getting crazier and crazier, don't they? I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we know the one who created it all. Checks my pulse. What's up? Bearded Saint. Folks, I will say this is I'm gonna put a hard stop there, and I'm gonna say something about crypto. It's starting again. We've waited a long, long time. The cycle of crypto, separate from all, it's starting again. People are starting to price in a Trump presidency, and this is it. Everybody basically had to get to the point where they basically gave up on everything, and you can see this across the board. And it's like, well, when is this point? Well, it begins now. And I'm excited about it for what it means for folks. But most people, you get to this point, and you don't recognize it for what it is. A lot of things are going to change in this world. A lot of things are going to change. But the beauty of this is, don't take my word for it. Ask him how he sees it. How do you see this? What is all this? But here's the thing. Part of the big reason that I continue to stream is the fact that God has made it clear to me that there are a lot of people who think that money is going to provide them. It's this thing that they built up that is the high place that they look up to. If I just had this mountain of money, everything would be okay. Money is just a tool. It is neutral, and it's animated with a certain nature and character. NT Fryer, what's up? What's up? Thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt, and SteveStaggs.com has a search tool on it that you can search any term, and if you want to do multiple terms, you put it in quotes. Take a look. Check it out. There's a podcast. That podcast format is in a playlist in YouTube. All 61 episodes are there, 60 so far, and you can listen to them in audio. You watch them in a playlist. The first 37 are with Steve Staggs. The following ones are just in honor of Steve Staggs. But we don't worship a man, right? He's just someone that's encouraging us, just like I'm trying to encourage you. But this is a really unique time, and I just want to say this: you have been created uniquely for a purpose. You matter. You have value, no matter what you're going through. And there's one who is alive and that speaks, who will also encourage you. He is a loving, caring Father, and it's true. And a lot of people in the world over the last week have seen something that they have a hard time describing. Why? Why does his head turn at the last minute? What does this look like? Why is this different? What is going on? And then the last thing is what Ray and I discovered and just experienced in reality. And that is, there's a whirlwind going on around us. And it's a metaphor for everything that is literally trying to draw you off sides. And Jesus stands alone in the middle and says, "Come, stand with me in the midst of the storm." Everybody wants to pull you out into that whirlwind that's spewing around and wants you to react to these things. And here it is, whether it's seated in the heavenlies, looking down, standing in the midst of the whirlwind, in the peacefulness of that, is that he literally will guide and provide you with the peace that transcends all understanding. And in my opinion, I am convinced that that's all there is. That's the currency of this whole place. In following and listening to a living and speaking Jesus, you can have peace that transcends all understanding and purpose and life to its fullest. Take care, everybody, and don't mess with Texas.